Now it's time for Inspirational Women, and my guest, Dr. Ellyn Lem, a professor of English and Gender Studies at UW-Milwaukee-Waukesha. Dr. Lem did some very interesting research in the field of aging, and we learned the results in her new book, Gray Matters, Finding Meaning in the Stories of Later Life. Here we'll find some critical learning regardless of our age. Dr. Ellyn Lem, good morning. Thank you so greatly for being with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm looking forward to talking with you.
Yeah, we've already chatted a bit, so I'm looking to even more conversation and letting our listeners know that this is really a good, engaging conversation surrounding a really important book, your new book, Gray Matters, Finding Meaning in the Stories of Later Life. And one thing about it, when I was thinking about gray matters can be a noun, but it can also be a verb. So I think it's kind of an interesting play on words. I don't know if that was necessarily your intention.
Oh, well, I am an English.
Yeah.
I'm an English professor, so we really went back and forth with the title a little bit. Originally, it was supposed to be Silver Seekers, like a play on Silver Sneakers, the program that gets seniors kind of gym memberships, and publisher didn't like that, and they wanted seasoned citizens, and for some reason, I kept thinking of, like, paprika every time, so I really had to fight against it. But Gray Matters we both agreed with. And so, there's a lot of wordplay, not only on the matters, trying to emphasize that I think that this time in life is really important and undervalued, but I try to talk about topics that are of most importance, I'm hoping, to people who are in their 60s and becoming older. And then the gray, in addition, has all kinds of nuances. So, yes, it's a very literary title in many ways. And I do pay tribute as well to the Black Lives Matter movement, who I benefited from in doing the title. So I wanted to make sure to credit that this wasn't, my own innovation, that I'm borrowing and indebted to the idea of the Black Lives Matter that took that word matters and gave it so much poignance and so much meaning and power.
And that's wonderful, actually, to make that kind of acknowledgement and, kind of bow to that, because each area is really important in itself, and then I think we find that how we need to be in this together and supporting each other.
Definitely, right. It is a collective. We're not going to change views of aging by, separating people into groups, boomers versus millennials, and thinking it in oppositional. We really, the best movements are from a collective of people of all different ages, different racial, ethnicity, socioeconomic. I mean, that really makes a movement. And so I'm really kind of calling for that as well in my book, for people to come together and change their view of aging as something to be dreaded.
And that then speaks to the point. Who is this book for? It's really for all of us. Regardless of our age, we can learn something about ourselves, about people. At a younger age, we can look forward to what that might look like, people's experiences, and really incorporate that, I think, into helping us to live even a better life.
Yeah, and that's really my hope, is that people at every age read this and it opens up their minds and challenges them to think in different terms, because this is not a simple how-to book. Like, this is how you age. This is how to understand how many people have lived their lives and how it impacts them, and how we can really benefit from not thinking in terms of like stereotypes about age, but actually, like, what can we learn from people who have had long lives? Like, what do they tell us about living? And that was one of the survey questions I put that I learned a lot from was, I asked people, what would you tell your 20-year-old self? And they were fascinating, People had all kinds of advice, everything from slow down, be more careful in your marriage partner, don't rush into marriage. They were all over the board, but so there's so many pearls of wisdom that I was able to, incorporate throughout from that advice. And that was just one question on the survey. There were over 20 of them.
And the survey, you actually were able to speak to or get answers from about 200 people. Is that right?
Exactly, yeah. And a lot of people then wanted to follow up interviews. So the surveys were done anonymously, of course, and they were done in both. There was an electronic form for those who were tech savvy, and people could have a link, and they sent it in, and they could share the link. So that's how it got spread from coast to coast and everywhere in between. But there was also a hard copy survey. And so once people took the survey, there were a lot of people who thought, oh, I really enjoyed giving my views on this. And so they said, I'm available to be interviewed. So I did follow-up interviews with several people, and then really got more from doing that. So yeah, there's a variety of primary research in the book. I also did a few experiential types of things that I talk about. I joined a co-housing group to learn about co-housing, and then I went and witnessed work that's being done in the creative arts with Alzheimer's patients. So and included my observations on that. So I feel like that some of these things maybe make the book a little bit unique in that I do have the survey results, the interviews, and then also some of these hands-on direct observations of issues that relate to topics that I cover in the book, like housing and dementia, things like that.
And would you say that dementia, and you just mentioned Alzheimer's as well, does that come up as perhaps one of the key concerns that it affects people in their senior years in terms of their thinking?
Right. I mean, that really came through in the surveys. People are really terrified about dementia and specifically Alzheimer's. Sometimes they mention one or the other. But yeah, and I do think that is important to recognize that the fear is in some degrees unwarranted, and because right now the percentage of people who are affected by Alzheimer's is going down. We will see more cases just from the sheer volume of people who are over 65, but the amount of people who are actually experiencing it is going down, and yet people are really anxious about it. Anytime they forget, the neighbor's first name, they immediately is like, okay, there it goes. My memory is leaving me, and people refer to something as a senior moment. So I do see people being very, very worried about it, but I feel as if, what I try to do in the book is to try to look at it in different ways, like not only bringing the statistics about what we know to be, it only really affect the early Alzheimer's affects a very small percentage, and then it goes up as people get older, but it's not as many people are affected as people are led to believe. But then also to just show that people who have various stages of dementia, that for many the quality of life is not bad. And so I tried to bring in the voices of those even who are experiencing it through some works. There's a writer, Richard Thomas, who wrote so eloquently about his Alzheimer's. So I'm really trying to challenge the viewpoint. One of the things researchers have noticed that a lot of what we hear in terms of stories about Alzheimer's are from caregivers, but that there's a difference between what caregivers, their view of it, and people themselves who are experiencing forms of dementia.
And it is so important to share those good stories because too often the negative maybe make the press or, get carried on forward. To get the good news stories and how people live and live well is important so that people embrace that more than thinking of the negative side.
Exactly, and that's why I really was struck with my colleague's work, Ann Basting, who did win a MacArthur Genius Award for her work with the creative arts with Alzheimer's. And she is putting on plays with patients who have Alzheimer's. She is doing, there have been art shows at the Milwaukee Art Museum. She has really been a leader in the creative part that remains, that trying to de-emphasize memory. We always think like memory is so important, but there are other aspects that are important, and creativity does not die. And so people who may not be able to remember what they had for breakfast the next day, but they can still participate in this fantastic storytelling that she has developed internationally now called Time Slips. And that was what I watched, where people are shown a picture and then together they collectively tell a story about the picture. So creativity remains even if people are losing some of their memories, particularly the short-term memory.
And that is so key, and I think it warrants giving it, a little bit of more time focus. It is with the arts that creative part of the brain. We don't know which part it will trigger, but it might be in. I've read in the past about doing artwork itself, painting and drawing has been able to channel. Some people who are dealing with memory issues, that they're able to do this kind of activity. So to know that and to search for that, I think is really important.
I think so too. Yes, and people shared with me artwork that was done by parents who had severe dementia, but the artwork was absolutely beautiful and was even part of art shows. And then, one of the people I feature in the book as well is a friend's father who had Alzheimer's, who played the piano up until his death, and he all the songs by heart. And so, he didn't have a lot of recognition of family members even, and yet he, there's videotapes of him that I was able to see of him at the piano just with flourishes. So it's not just like he's playing, Mary Had a Little Lamb. He's like playing, Gershwin, and, with all kinds of, added touches with his fingers. And it was just really incredible to see that, to be able to witness, even though there were some obvious, severe mental losses, but there were still parts that were essential to him. I have a picture of him as like a very young man and him, 70 years older, still at the piano, because that was just central to who he was.
And so these are the kinds of things, these experiences that I think really need to be known and shared and understood, so that while things change is just part of our life. It may look differently, but it's not dismal. There's still quality. There's still joy that can be present.
Exactly. I could not agree with you more. And we do see that in several places in the books. Not only, several of the writers that I include are in their 90s. So one of the U.S. Poet Laureates, Donald Hall, he had written a book in his 80s, and then he wrote another one when he was, in his 90s, Notes on 90s. That was one of the ones that has a very open discussion of sexuality with he and his wife, and that was in his Notes on 90s. And another artist that I bring out is Louise Bourgeois, who was a sculptor, and this is a good example of your change. So she had produced a lot of like very big, heavy sculptures at different points, but so she changed some of her technique, and then by the end, some of the pictures that were that I had in there were part of a show that it was at a Museum of Modern Art. She was like in her late 90s. I think it's some of her most beautiful work. So it's not, bronze sculptures anymore. These were things that she did with watercolor, with fabrics and other things. So she changed according to maybe like her physical strength, but they're beautiful. And, thank goodness she did not say to herself like, oh, who does art into their 80s? That's ridiculous. I should just retire. She just made changes. And so fortunately we have a lot more beautiful art because she embraced that.
And that is so beautiful and so heartening. Again, that needs to be retold and retold again because of knowing that we changing and adapting. We're not one static thing for like 20 years.
Exactly.
Right? There's always change, right?
Yeah, definitely. And just one other artistic example of it, but this really struck me, was that I had learned about Matisse, and that Matisse had been he was when he had some kind of, I think it was a form of cancer surgery, and he was was mostly in a wheelchair. That's when he decided to do the cutouts that became his famous collages. That was when he was sort of immobilized and couldn't walk, that he created the gorgeous collages that we have that have made stained glass windows and everything. And that was because he was confined to a wheelchair, so he couldn't paint the canvases in the same way. Mm-hmm. But, he gave us something else. And so I do feel that those really are something to draw inspiration from, that reminders to ourselves that we just have to change and adapt and find new ways to lead meaningful lives, like so many have.
As the subtitle or the next part of the title is, finding meaning in the stories of later life. Finding that meaning is that inspiration and seeing how others have done it and feeling like, okay, I'm just going to be evolving. Hopefully that evolution is growing as well.
Exactly, right. And, I want people to not think like, oh, I'm saying you have to like run a marathon when you're, because there's a tendency to take senior superstars and hold them up as, look what they did. And so it's not a race, it's not a competition. It's just a way to feel that even if, a person is immobilized in some ways, or they're not able to have some strengths or abilities or things that they had in the past, that it doesn't mean necessarily that they should devalue themselves as a person, that they just need to find a way to still do things that give them a sense of purpose and that are fulfilling. And so just not being able to see everything in what our abilities that we once had, but like think about what would be, a purposeful way to live one's life. And that could be, taking care of a foster kitten. I think that people need to realize that there's all kinds of ways that are a purposeful life that don't involve, traveling around the world with Doctors Without Borders. Mm-hmm. Like people can give purpose in their daily lives, and the research is that they live longer as a result of it. And it's interesting. I was just reading a novel just this summer, and I'm not sure like why I picked it up, but it was called I think it's called like The Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry. And it's about a person who retires from has worked at a brewery, and an old coworker um, comes into his life, and by sending a postcard saying that she's sick, and she lives somewhere in England far away, and he decides to go see her, and by walking, and it's just a really interesting story that happens and I think what he didn't realize was that he needed purpose. He needed something in his life that was meaningful, and so he walks like across England to see this former coworker. And I felt like that novel really represents what the researchers have said about that idea of people wanting to have meaning and have something that makes them feel good about themselves. That goes on forever, and the more we can act on that, the more satisfied people will feel about their lives.
Exactly. And so much of maturing, living many years and then decades of life, typically we'll pick up some wisdom. Hopefully we're picking up wisdom so that looking at our senior citizens, the older generation, rather than someone to be scorned, we used to revere this. And I think still in Asian cultures, seniors are revered. It's not so much here in North America, is it?
Exactly. There really is a difference. And I was really struck a few weeks ago. I went to botanical gardens in Chicago and was in the Japanese garden, and I saw a plant there, and there was a sign by it and said, this type of plant is pruned in a way to make it look old. Because in Asian cultures, there's so much reverence and appreciation of people who are older that this plant, that they make it look old so that it gives it a higher status. And I thought to myself, wow, I can't imagine that happening here where we would want anything to necessarily look old. There's such a anti-aging commercial stream going on, of anti-aging. So that we really are sending the opposite message, which really is in contrast to other cultures who have a lot more appreciation for, years that people put together for experience and, respect that aspect.
Thinking of the plant and wanting to have it look aged and, thinking of, yeah, as you said, our culture is to be looking young. I think of the actress Diane Keaton,
Mm-hmm.
and I just admire her greatly for aging gracefully, I would say, that she just continues to live her life and she still is working. I'm not even sure what age she is, in her 70s.
Right. Oh,
Right?
yeah,
Yeah.
at least.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that there are a lot of actresses like that, and that's why, I really was happy to showcase some films in the book, like Book Club, that has Candice
Yes.
Bergen in it, and Jane Fonda, and so I was really happy when some of these films were released and to be able to bring them up because older women are being able to find some roles, and I think there's a need certainly for more. But another actress that comes to mind for me is Frances McDormand, who has written a lot about refusing to abide by Hollywood standards for older actresses, and she's just taken on projects herself. So one of the ones that I think is really powerful, and I talk a lot about in the book, is Olive Kitteridge. It was a novel by Elizabeth Strout, and then Frances McDormand turned it into an HBO miniseries. So she starred in it, she produced it, she directed it, she did everything. And in it, she's not trying to cover the gray. She's not trying to cover her wrinkles, she recognizes that we respect Olive Kitteridge because she is a person who's had a full, complex life, and she really shows that. She really brings it to the forefront. So I just have a lot of admiration for her as well.
Yes, we need more of that, or at least appreciate the films that we have that portray that, because I think that has more of the ring of truth and authenticity to it.
Exactly, right. And, I do also point out some films that are problematic. So talk about one called Grandpa, where they have somebody who is in their 20s playing an older person with every stereotype in the book, from the hunched over to all kinds of, you take your stereotype, it's done, and that's really problematic, because then that just calls people to let's laugh at old people, and it makes it seem as if it's okay, and it's dismissive, it's disrespectful, and then it backfires on people, because then they're going to be more freaked out about being old.
Yes.
Because who wants to be laughed at? Who wants to be, an object of mockery? Nobody I know. And so I do think that, that's one of my intents in Gray Matters, is to talk about culture that brings a more realistic and a more positive view of the aging process versus ones that are just being played for laughs. And even talking about the grandpa in The Simpsons, how, we're supposed to just laugh at him. And so some people might say that's harmless, but I don't think that it is. I feel like when I see examples of people being treated well in literature and film and television and shown as people that you would want to embrace, and who look as if they have lives that are complex, that does a lot more for all of us as a society than just recycling the same jokes over and over again.
Yes. And I think it really ought to challenge us to think about, we think a thought is small or an action is small, but it really ripples out. And if it's a negative one, it's going to ripple out greater that way. If we do positive things, then they'll ripple out to being a big thing and important. So I think we need to really question those kinds of reactions, don't we?
Exactly. I think that's great. Yeah, just being more conscious of media. I mean, I think that people are not aware of ageism like they are about racism. Something that happened the other day, so one of my colleagues put something up on Facebook. It's a popular meme, but it gets used in different ways. But it was about boomers, and the message of it was that boomers are drawn towards racism and homophobia and all of this stuff, and then that young people are more enlightened. And I called her on it right away and just said, this is damaging. I think, before I was there, everybody put the ha-ha emoji, oh, it's so true, and then I said, I actually think that's ageist. Mm-hmm. Why are we making the assumption that because someone was born within a certain period of time that they are going to be more susceptible to racism, homophobia? You pick your bad ism, and they're more likely to it. And so the person said, oh, I had no idea that was ageist. I didn't even see it, and that's yep.
Yeah, exactly.
You and all the other people who put the ha-ha emojis are not aware of the fact that it is just recycling a negative message that doesn't help anyone. It makes people more afraid to be part of that demographic one day, because it's a group that's been ridiculed and oversimplified to represent some of the bad aspects of society.
And that is why I believe this new book, Gray Matters, Finding Meaning in the Stories of Later Life, is so critically important. We have so much to learn from this. And Dr. Ellyn Lem, I am so grateful that you've written this book. We should let people know it's available now. It's best to call your local favorite bookstore and ask them if they have it, and if not, to order it for them, right?
That would be great. Yes, people can also get it through Rutgers University Press. But yes, I believe in supporting local bookstores as much as possible, and they should be able to order it. And it is fresh off the press. It just got released this month.
So it's totally relevant to our lives at any time, and certainly right now it's a good time to be reading and learning and reaching out in very positive and supportive, loving ways, right?
Definitely. I couldn't have said it better. You got a writer in you as well, it sounds like.
Oh, well, I don't know about that, but I love books and I love reading, and I certainly appreciate those who write so well and are able to share their wisdom with us. And that is you, Dr. Lem. I'm so grateful that we've had this time together this morning.
Thank you so much. I really enjoy talking with you. You really are. You're a very engaging conversationalist, and I have really good insight. So it was very satisfying being able to have this talk.
Well, great. Thank you. And with that, we're at the end of a very full hour of Inspirational Women with Dr. Ellyn Lem and Sunday Morning Magazine with Dr. Joseph Cardillo. I'm Kate Daniels, your host, and I greatly appreciate your sharing this hour with me and these special guests. For details you might have missed or information you'd like to know, please just send me an email, kated@warm1069.com, and I'll get right back to you. Also, if you'd like to listen again or share these important stories with your family and friends, find the podcast on our Warm 1069 webpage. Click on the podcast tab, then look for the show and guest names, and you'll also find an archive of previous ones. I now wish you and your family a day of attention to life, love, and each other. Have a week of the same, and then please plan to join me again next weekend for another hour of Sunday Morning Magazine and Inspirational Women on Warm 1069. Good morning.